What's up YouTube, and welcome to another tutorial using Infinite Painter, where today we're going to go ahead and create this octopus design. Now it's actually really simple to create, so just make sure you trust the process and you follow along with today's design. You'll just need the palette image, which I've positioned up here in the top left, so you can grab all those colors and follow along. I'll explain how you can add that into the canvas once we get started. As always, if you want to support the channel here and all the work that I do, you can now become a member of the channel where you can support the work. You get a loyalty badge beside your name and also early access to these tutorials as well. So if you want to check that out, there'll be a link in the description down below. Make sure to tag me in your finished creations over on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, wherever you decide to share them. And with all that said, let's get started. So as always, we're starting off with a 2000 by 2000 canvas and we'll hit create. And then as always, we'll go up to our three dots in the top right. We'll go to the option of import. We're going to grab the palette image from our photos or files. Once you've tapped on the image, this is going to change. Do you want to change it to a layer or a reference? We're going to pick reference and it will pop it up in the corner there. You can zoom in and out on that, make it as large or as small as you like. And also, as always, three dots, settings, and just make sure if you don't have the option with your equipment to do a eyedropper, set your gesture to the eyedropper here and you'll be able to hold down with a finger and you get a little ring around it to then select the colors. But I can do that with my equipment. You may be able to do the same. So let's go ahead and let's start off with our background. Now for a minute, we're going to go ahead and just set the background here. So we're going to grab this dot here. We're going to select the color and we're going to grab the pipette tool and we're going to grab this color here in the bottom left of the palette. Once you've done that, we're then going to go ahead and we're going to change our color to white by dragging it up into the top left. Going to grab our brush, going to go to calligraphy, and we're going to use the monoline brush. If you go ahead and once you've tapped on the monoline brush though and go to your settings, I've set my smoothing up to around about sort of 60 to 70 odd in that sort of space, just to make sure your lines are nice and smooth. We're then going to go up to our create options. We're going to go to the option of symmetry and vertical. Now you'll get a line that runs down your screen. If you don't see that, potentially your settings are already locked. So if we go back up there, we go to the option of symmetry. In the top left, you've got this little settings icon that's just appeared. If you tap on that, you can go ahead and unlock it just to see that line in the middle there. But we do want to lock it. So just tap on the lock. It will now position itself in the center. Now what you do on one side is reflected on the other. We only need to use that for just a small period of time to create the initial shape. So what you want to kind of do is create a bit of a pin shape. So we're going to start in the middle here, draw outwards and then round that off at the top. That's going to be the head of your octopus. So once you've got a shape like this, just make sure it's linked at the bottom. Tap on your symmetry tool when you're done. Go to your create options and go to fill and tap and drag to the right hand side a couple of times just to make sure it completely fills and hit the tick when you're done. We're then going to go ahead and use this shape to create the tentacles that are going to come off of here. So you kind of want to follow the curvature of the line down and we're going to create a bit of a swirl. But we're only going to create one side of the actual lines or the tentacle, shall I say, to start with. So you want to create this kind of shape here, run that into the middle, then grab your create tool, go to fill. Now you may want to hold down on tools on your fill tool and just pop it up here because we're going to probably use that a couple of times. So tap on the paint bucket, drag to the right hand side a couple of times to make sure it fills in fully and hit the tick when you're done. Once you've done that, we can then move over to the opposite side and create another one, but you don't want it to be too symmetrical. So try and make this a little bit sort of unique. So follow the line down and then swirl outwards. Maybe make this one a little bit smaller and run that back into the body like so. Grab your paint bucket, drag to the right hand side a couple of times and hit the tick when you're done. Now what you may or may not want to do here is potentially just increase a little bit more of a flick on the end here, a little bit like this. So you may have to run it into your lines like so. I'm going to grab my paint bucket and fill that in again just a couple of times. If you get any sort of mini pixels here and there that are not quite filled in, just go ahead and do that. Now that one overlaps on itself, which in a minute is going to allow us to create some additional sort of fold over of the tentacles. Now zooming out, that's the full canvas for the minute. So that's kind of the scale we want to go with. What I'm now going to do is I'm going to create a new layer and drag it underneath that layer. And so we've got an empty layer underneath. So it's the bottom one. The top one here is the white one. The new empty one is there. I'm just going to grab my color for a minute and just set it to like a gray here in the middle. It's not really mandatory what color it is. If we zoom in, we just want to create 3 more tentacles, because then we're going to go ahead and then create the additional 3 on the back end as well. So you kind of want to start over here. We're just going to create some very small little curls here that just gradually get bigger into the body. Make sure you create a loop, go all the way around. And then once you've done that, you can then grab your paint and drag to the right hand side again. So that's one of them. So maybe you want to go ahead and just sort of take a look at that and try and work that into your own work. We're then going to hit tick. We're going to create another new layer because we want to separate these and have some layering to them. So we're going to run another one that's going to come from the middle. It's going to swirl around here and it's going to really come back on itself a little bit more than the last one and run up into the body, and then just go around and connect it to your starting point. So again, you can grab your paintbrush and drag to the right hand side a couple of times. We're going to create another new layer, hit the tick on your paintbrush and go again. So I'm going to start, for example, over here in the middle. I'm going to run across here, create a bit of a drop and then another curl out on itself, and then flick that round all the way round and create a loop. And then again, grab your paintbrush and tap and drag in there a few times. So you should end up with 3 then underneath, and you can move them around. I urge you to sort of move them if needs be. You may want to move them up slightly. What we want to do is we want to make sure that the first one that we created, this one here, is at the top. So we'll drag that now to the top and then kind of take a look at our layers, and in a minute we'll see how they layer on top. We may want to move them around, but for a minute that's the goal. And then we can go ahead and create a new layer. We can drag it all the way to the very bottom. We can go ahead and we'll grab another color. So we'll just grab another gray. So we'll just grab it a slightly darker gray this time. And then in the distance, in the back, we're going to create 3 more tentacles, and they're just going to sit right in the gaps. So we want to draw one in here, maybe a little something like this. Make them a tiny bit smaller and go all the way around and try and link up to your line somewhere. Grab your paintbrush and tap and drag to the right. And again, they're going to be right at the back, so it's not really a big... Now you can, again though, if you want to, you could go ahead and grab your edit tool and the basic transformation at this point and maybe rotate that one up and out maybe a little bit more, like a little bit more horizontal like this rather than down. It's totally up to you. I'm actually going to keep that like that. And what we'll do is I'll go ahead and draw in another one in this gap and another one off to the right hand side. So on the same layer, I'm just going to simply create like another curve. Now we don't want lines running into corners. That's always a rule. So you want to just create a tentacle right back there, loop it round, grab your brush or your fill tool and tap and drag to the right, hit the tick. Again, we'll do another one over here. You could duplicate that and move it across if you wanted to, but otherwise just try and take a look at it and see if we can sort of match up to its aesthetic a tiny bit. So can we go ahead and just sort of create like another one that kind of curls around here? Gives me a little bit like so. Now that one at the back end didn't quite look right, so I'm just going to create that again and let that get gradually bigger as it gets in towards the body. And then I'll hit the paintbrush, tap and drag to the right a couple of times and hit the tick when we're done. So now we've got our octopus. We've got all of the layers that we need for this. We can now start to go ahead and start to paint everything in correctly. But before we do, there's a couple of additional shapes that we need to create as well. So we're going to create a new layer and drag it all the way to the very bottom. So it'll be the bottom layer. We're going to go ahead and we're going to add in some of the areas that are going to be the underside of some of these tentacles that are pointing upwards now. So if we go to our palette, we're going to grab the top color here, the top of the second column, and we're going to start to draw them in. So what you want to do is you want to kind of follow the contour here of this line here, bring that round on itself, and then let that run into this line and link that up. So if you grab your paintbrush and you tap and drag to the right, and again a couple of times just to triple check, that is the underside curling back on itself and revealing itself. Now once we've done that, we'll just go to the white layer here at the top. We'll grab our eraser and tap on it and use the monoline brush under calligraphy as well. I'm just going to zoom in and I'm just going to follow this line into this line. So what I'm doing is I'm just chopping off that kind of top area there and the bit that kind of was a bit too rounded, because now you can see how it flips on itself, and we'll have to do the same over here too. Now we'll go down to that layer again, so the purple layer. You want to go back to your brush and repeat. We're going to go ahead and bring one in over here as well. So maybe this one starts a little bit lower down this time and it curls right under on itself. And we go all the way around to our start point and we grab our paint brush and we fill it in. I keep saying paintbrush, but it doesn't matter. Now, we then again want to go to the white layer here. We want to grab our eraser and we just want to see if we can tidy up any sort of areas here. Now, I think I can go ahead and run sort of basically along here and get rid of all of this on there, so I can see that little flip from the underside a little bit easier. There we go. That looks awesome. Let's go back down to the purple layer because we've still got a couple more to do. We'll go back to our paintbrush. Now, we do need to actually go ahead and add them also to these three here in the gray section. So we're just going to move the layer up one more. So it's just in front of the really far back ones. We're not going to do much on those. So it's just underneath the gray ones, the light gray. We're going to zoom in, and these ones don't need to be as large. So you can go ahead, for example, and just create like a little underside here and link that together. Grab your bucket tool and drag to the right hand side. Just as simple as that for this one. Hit the tick. And this one here too. We'll go ahead and just create another sort of rounding shape in here. Link that together. Grab your paintbrush and drag to the right. Again, we'll tidy this up in a second, these areas here, but while we've got three of them, we'll go ahead and we'll draw in the last one that's going to come along here, and then again go round to your starting point. Grab your paint and let's drag and drop it in there and hit the tick when we're done. And then if you go to the grey layers, if you find the one, for example, over here on the right hand side, if we tap on that, we grab our eraser again, we can just go ahead and just sort of chop into here. You can follow the curvature of the line work that you created, and that'll do nicely. We'll move across to the middle one. Again, I kind of need to just sort of loop in here and get rid of that. And again, we'll go to the top one over here. And again, let's try and just create a bit of a curve in here too. And see if we can just round that off enough. And that's okay, that will do. So we've now got the undersides all in. What we now want to go ahead and do is just change some of the colors quickly before we go ahead and then add in some further details. So we're going to go to the white layer here at the top. So we've got this layer here. We're going to grab the middle color here in the second column. We're going to go back to our fill tool, so our paint bucket. We're going to tap and drag to the right hand side in there, and you may need to do that a couple of times just to get rid of any fuzzy edges. And again, we're going to go down a layer. We're going to tap and drag in there. We're going to go down to this one, tap and drag in there. And again, this is where you may see a bit of an overlap. So in my opinion, I actually need to drag this one underneath because I've got this little excess, or I tidy it up. Either is fine. But we just need to make sure all of these light grey ones here are nicely filled in, and hit the tick when you're done. The ones at the back are going to be a slightly darker tone. So we're going to go ahead and grab the bottom colour here in the second column. We'll go down to these ones here at the back and we'll tap and drag in them. So we need to tap and drag to the right. I'm not fussed necessarily about the fuzzy edge either, because that actually just helps us if anything. So I'm going to hit the tick when I'm done. Let's then go ahead and add in some colour on top of these purple areas. So we're going to go ahead and find this area here, this layer, create a new layer. We're going to go ahead and grab this colour here, the middle of the far right column. Our brush can stay as the monoline brush, that's perfectly fine. What we're going to do is we're going to zoom in on here, we're going to draw in all the little kind of suction pads, and they're just going to be tiny little sort of ellipses like this. Now, one thing I kind of want you to do is if we set the brush size to say a little bit larger, maybe around about 20, the ones on the top edge up here, I want you to try and make them a little bit larger in terms of they go a little bit beyond the actual body and the underside there. That shows a little bit more depth than how it's raising up and out of this flat surface. So I can create another one here, and they don't need to be super perfect or anything like that. We can bring the brush size down now because they're the largest ones. We can go ahead and just create another one here. We'll create another one here, and we'll just keep going down this side here all the way down. But they just want to gradually get a little bit smaller, and the ones on the side there, you're probably going to lose them a little bit. So I've just made the brush progressively smaller so I can work in this area. I'm going to draw this line in first as it makes its way all the way down, and again you could probably get some now right at the bottom just sort of sticking their way out a little bit. And then in this gap here we can have one sticking out, we can have one that's a little bit thinner, and then we lose it. It rolls around onto the other side. And then we're going to do the same just up here as well. So we'll set the brush size back up to around about 14 again. We'll go ahead and draw in some more on here. We want to make sure they're nice and smooth to an extent. And they don't always have to leave the body. Okay, so you can create them like this, And then you can create another one like this as well. And we'll make another one a little bit smaller. Let's go a bit bigger than that, about 10. And just one just there as it rolls round. And now you're seeing all the little suction cups make their way through. And again, you want to do the same on this side. So again, we sort of go in with around about sort of a 16-ish marker here, draw in your largest ones here. And again, they don't always have to leave the body of this sort of a tentacle. So I'm drawing another one here, drawing another one there. You can squeeze one in there. That one's not quite matching up to the angle. That one's a little bit better. I'm going to do this side first, so I'm going to come down here. These are already getting a little bit thinner and a little bit smaller because they very quickly kind of roll round onto the opposite side. So that may be something you have to factor in your work too. And there we go, we've got some on there too. And we're going to add in some really small ones at the very bottom down here. So just on this area here, we're going to introduce one here, another one there, one in here, and then maybe we can just sort of add in a very small one there. And it doesn't matter if you only get sort of one large one, for example, here in the middle, and then two smaller ones off to the side. That's perfectly fine. We're just going to draw those in, keeping it nice and simple. We do have to sort of shade these in, etc. afterwards as well, so just bear that in mind. A little something like that. And now we've done all of the suction cups. We're not going to do it on the ones in the distance. We're just going to sort of give the impression, though, that they're kind of too far away. And we're not going to add those details to it. So now we can start to get into the options of adding in sort of shading, etc. Now the first thing I want to do is I just want to bring out the background. So what we'll do is we'll create a new layer and we'll drag it all the way to the very bottom of our layers. We're going to go up to our create options. We're going to go to gradient. We're going to tap on the gradient option up here. We're going to change it to radial, and we're going to tap and drag in the sort of middle of our canvas as best as we can and drag out. And you can drag to the bottom, you can drag to the bottom right, it's up to you. But something like this is pretty good. And then you can tap on this node here, for example. We can go ahead and tap on this and we get the color picker pop in. When we do, we want to go ahead and grab our pipette tool here. We're going to go to our colors and we're going to go ahead and grab this purple here at the top of the second column there. And then the bottom color here, we're going to tap on it, grab our pipette, and again we're going to grab the color in the bottom left. Now what that will do is that will just give you a little bit of a glow happening in behind our octopus. So we can hit the tick when we're done, and now we've got a nice background. And we can also reveal a little bit more of the tentacles at the back, which we'll come to in a moment. So I'm going to start at the very top of my layers. I'm just going to now usually I'd create layers and separate them and add in highlights and shadows. You can still do that, but for time's sake in this one and ease of use for everyone else, I'm going to tap on it and I'm going to alpha lock it. So now I can't paint outside of what I've already drawn on that layer. So if I now go ahead and we grab a nice light tone to start shading in here, we're going to start off with this color here, the top of the second column there. I'm going to go to our brush. I'm going to back out of the brush. Now it's totally up to you. You can use something under sprayers such as the soft airbrush, but I want to go for something with a bit of texture in that. It may take a little bit more time to do though. So we're going to go ahead and use the sand blaster, or you can use the flex brush. I think the sand blaster is probably the better option. We're going to go ahead and set the size first of all to something nice and large, probably around about that 100 mark. That looks pretty good. And the options down here is maximum opacity, maximum flow. Now this color should start to be your basic highlight. So we're going to go ahead and run this over the right hand side, right up against the edge as well. And you can really chuck the color in. The lighting's coming from the very top right edge. So it's going to come down here, it's going to curl round on the top of this tentacle. It's then going to get lost, obviously, underneath this tentacle, so we won't highlight under there too much. And then we can add a bit of a reverb highlight, so we can add a tiny bit down this left-hand side here. And you may need to press quite firm if you have pressure sensitivity. And then there's going to be a lot of lighting just in this middle area here of the tentacle, which runs up and under, so we can nicely add in some highlight in here and sort of push that over towards the middle of the body and then kind of let that round off over here. So let's just try and increase this because we've got further highlights to bring in. So for now we can go ahead and just bring that in nice and bright on that right side. Now obviously we also need to factor in some shadows in here as well. So we can go ahead and do that straight away. So we're going to grab the bottom here of the second column. we're going to darken up the underside down here. So I didn't want to get you to your highlights just yet, your main highlights. Now the first thing we want to do is make sure that this middle area here is nice and dark, because it's going to blend perfectly into this area. This is just going to be darkness. So we're just going to run that up through the middle and then round the underside here of the tentacles, round here, and then you can darken up the underside as well. So where that curls over on itself, you can now darken under there to show how the lighting's no longer sort of wrapping up there. It's actually shaded, if anything. Likewise, we'll do the same under here too. We can show that the lighting's not getting under there, and it makes its way down. It connects to the underside here of the tentacle. You can darken that up, and again, this area here in the middle, we really want to darken up. Don't worry if you lose some of your purples, we can always reintroduce them. And again, let's go underside a little bit more too. And then we're going to just run that up and over towards this left hand side, curving your pen to try and follow along with the curvature of the body that we've created here, so the main head area, and blending it in towards the middle. So getting a little bit lighter. You may need to adjust your opacity and flow if you don't have pressure sensitivity, but we're just going to bring that up and around over to here, nicely darkening up this left hand side. You should start to have this really beautiful speckled aesthetic to your design. Now, at the same time, we're going to go ahead and reintroduce some of the purples if you need to. So the top of the second column there, you can start to bring them back in on top of the dark tones if you wish. So just triple checking that they're all still there. You can also run the odd speckle over the top of your shadows as well. You get a lovely layering effect of everything. Now we'll then go ahead and start to move into some brighter tones as well. So we're going to go ahead and let's utilize some of these colors over here. So we'll go ahead and we'll grab this color here, the middle of the first column there. We'll go down this edge and look at how that color is now going to start to really brighten up. And you can really tell how the lighting and where the lighting's coming from. That top right area, the lighting's coming from above. Now, the beautiful thing with this tutorial is as you start to sort of add in these highlights, you're getting so many speckles of all the different tones. So here we're getting these lovely purples underneath shining through with this nice brighter tone up here in the top right. And you can wrap that round the top. You can wrap the lighting a tiny bit, so it goes round over the top surface here. And you can, right out here, you can see how wide I am. You can introduce a little bit of extra color, like a reverb highlight, just down here, just to kind of bring out the side and the sort of profile of the octopus. So that's a little bit of extra lighting here. We can go ahead and introduce some on here too, brightening that up, letting that flow back and up and into the body, but adding that brighter spot just down here. And again, we've got a slightly more bright tone to add in as well. We've got a little bit of area here. We just need to sort of dance on some lighting too as well. So we'll introduce that under here. Again, I'm kind of going up towards my shadows, if not actually slightly on top of them. And then we'll go ahead and grab the color in the top left of the palette. We'll go down this side again. This one's even brighter, but we're going to keep this one as close to the edge as we can, really. We don't want to kind of go too far into the body. There may be the odd area, such as like down here, where you may want to introduce like a little bit in here and build up all those tones. So let's get under there, maybe a little bit on here too in this kind of bright spot here. I imagine the lighting is going to come down and crash onto there, so that's looking pretty sweet. And now we're pretty much done with the sort of top area of the octopus. You could go back in with the base color, the blue, and if you needed to, maybe sort of break down your shadows if needs be, or maybe even introduce some more blue in the kind of middle area of the head. But that's totally optional. I quite like how mine's turned out. Now, if we go ahead and go down a layer, we've then got this tentacle here. So this one over here. Again, we'll tap on it and we will alpha lock it so we can't paint outside of it. We'll go ahead and repeat the same steps. We'll grab the purple here, the top of the second column. Now you may want to bring your brush down. It was 103 before. It's now going to be down to around about sort of 70, only because we're in a much smaller area. So where's the highlight? I imagine, based on the fact that the top area is here, I imagine there's going to be a bit of highlight here, and that's pretty much it. You know, we can get away with making these fairly dark. So we're going to just bring a little bit of purple up and around here, and a little bit like so. And then we'll go ahead and grab our shadow tone, the bottom of the second column. Again, in here, we want this to be super dark. And because this is the first tentacle that runs into this middle area, we have to pack in the shadow here. We want it to be kind of seamless between where the tentacle sort of starts and where it ends, and so that it just runs into this dark spot. So you can't really tell, and that's kind of the magic sometimes of like art, is just hiding something, making it a bit more discreet. I'm bringing the brush size down to about 50 again, a bit smaller yet again, just so I can kind of darken up a little bit on the underside here and get into some of these smaller areas. So I'm going to really darken up down here. I'm going to leave that little bit of lighting. I'm going to darken up under here. Now you don't need to get rid of absolutely everything with the shadows. You can leave some of the blue and you can leave some of the purple like here. You don't need to get rid of absolutely everything, but it's mainly in this little pocket here that we just want to make sure that things are nice and dark. And we can always come back to it, can't we? Now I think, to be honest, based off the lighting, we could maybe brighten this up just a patch. So let's go to this middle of the first column and just add in a little bit of a brighter spot just on there where the lighting's just coming through and it just catches on this tentacle somehow. And then maybe a little bit of reverb lighting right on the edge. You can see how far outside the shape I actually am. I'm just trying to add in like a little bit of an outline effect to the tentacle just to reveal its shape a little bit more. And maybe we could add in the tiniest little one back here just to reveal its shape again back there and kind of separate it. Sometimes with art you can take artistic liberties. It's totally up to you. Let's move down to the next one, tap on it. Let's go ahead and alpha lock it. Let's go ahead and grab our purple again to the top of the second column. We're moving into this one here. This one I imagine is going to get a lovely big sort of bright highlight here. So let's go ahead and just brighten that area up here. Lovely stuff. Maybe we can add in a bit of highlight in there too, so circular motion in there. Let's make it a bit bigger than we need it, but let's just punch it in. And then let's go ahead and grab our shadow color, bottom of the second column. Go ahead and just darken up in that again, making it so that we don't know where the tentacle sort of starts and ends. You could shadow here just to kind of show that this one's in front of this one. So I'm really shadowing this now, and I'll shadow down the back area of it. So a little bit down here. We'll go ahead and shadow just like on the edge and especially the underside. Bringing that in like so, darkening that up. Punching in loads and loads of texture. And again, let's go ahead and grab that middle of the first column and just brighten up on this top surface here, just to introduce a little bit of highlight on there. And that's all we'll do. We'll move to the next one. We'll tap on it. We will alpha lock it. We will go ahead and grab our purple again, top of the second column, and repeat. So I'm imagining the lighting's probably catching here maybe. And then maybe a little bit actually more so on the end here. If the lighting's coming from the right, this tentacle actually could be getting absolutely bathed in the lighting. So I'm going to really brighten up, should I say, this area over here on the end and this right side of it. Really try and chuck in some color on there and then let that kind of blend up and in towards what will be our shadowy areas. And we'll grab our shadow color, the bottom of that second column, we'll darken up in there. So again, just sort of darkening that up, going over myself a few times. Bring that shadow down this edge. Definitely going to introduce a bit of a reverb highlight on here. So I'm just going to darken it up for a minute, get really close to those purples and leave some of the blues as well. And then we'll grab our highlight tone, so the middle of the first column. We'll come down that edge. We will really brighten this area up. Well, I say really, we will chuck in some light right up against this edge is what I mean to say. So a little something like that. And then a little bit of reverb as well, just sort of around the very bottom edge, potentially, just in there. Just to add in a little bit more, and also on this right side, we can add in some light as well. Now, based on the fact that the lighting, I think, is coming across, we can grab the color in the top left of the palette and probably brighten up the edge just over here a little bit more as well. Again, showing where the lighting's coming from. So that is our tentacles done with in that sort of middle ground area. If we go down a layer, let's just see what we've got to work on next. Now, it's actually these sort of circles that we created on the octopus. So what we will do is, the first thing we'll do is we'll tap on them and we will alpha lock them so we can't paint outside of them. We're going to go ahead and we're going to grab the bottom of the second column again. We're going to go to our brush, but make it a lot smaller, probably around about the 20 mark, I imagine. And there's two things we need to do every single time. We need to draw a hole in the middle, so I probably need to go smaller than that. I'm going to go down to 13. I'm going to create like a dark dot in the middle, You can hear my pen hitting the screen over and over. And once we've done that on everywhere, we can then go ahead and shade the sides. So what I mean by that is we'll go ahead and I'll just show you one so it's complete. We'll shade this side over here because the lighting's on the right hand side. So we're just shading round here, darkening up this edge, blending it round towards the right side. And that's all you would need to do. So if you want to, you're more than welcome to obviously carry on and sort of replicate that all the way around yourself if you don't want to follow along exactly sort of time for time. Get all of your dots in here first, I would recommend, and then go round and shade them afterwards. So we'll bring the brush size down and we'll just continue just to sort of punch in all of these. Now don't forget these sort of suction holes here, they are everywhere. So they're on 5 different tentacles that we've drawn in anyway. So we need to make sure that we nicely pack them all in everywhere. Now these ones on the very left hand side are facing away from our light source. So as you start to get further down here, these ones technically should probably get a little bit darker. So we'll factor that in a moment to my work. And now the circular sort of center point flips over on itself and starts to face the right hand side a bit more. Darkening up the center, going over a few times. You may not like that brush either, so you can change it if you want to. Set the brush to 16. Let's go for 16. Let's darken up. So again, if we actually align this correctly, the lighting's coming across. So the right hand side will be nice and bright, which means the left hand side and the underside can be nice and dark. So we can darken up under here. Now this one here is facing quite over to the right hand side, so I can't really add any on the left edge of it. So I'm adding it in on the darkest spot, which will be the bottom. So you just got to imagine where that lighting's coming from. Is it hitting our little donut here? And if it is, should you then shade up the left hand side as well, based off of the angle? Now these ones over here definitely do. And we're just going to keep going and adding in all of those. So again, there may be a brush that you prefer than this one. This brush is, one that you do have to go over yourself a few times, but that's the kind of grainy effect, the kind of stipple effect that we want for today's design. Because look how beautiful this is. All of these tones in here. Now again, these ones over here, they could probably have a bit of sort of shading, but nothing too intense, because ultimately, if you were to sort of make your brush size a bit bigger now, maybe up to around about sort of over 10 mark, probably 16, you could probably just color in the majority of it, because there's not going to be too much of a sort of bright spot compared to the ones on the very top. So let's just get sort of a bit sort of cheeky with them down here and kind of just darken them up, but give them an overall sort of darker tone. Just literally go over it a few times to darken those up, leaving these ones here a lot brighter. Now you can see we've obviously got to continue this kind of pattern all the way around, which has got to then move over to here as well. So we've got to set our brush back down to a small like 8 point here and get right into all these center points. Now I don't typically in my tutorials skip ahead very much, and this is one of those ones where I think I could have, but I'm not going to, because we have different lighting angles, so it's not all exactly the same. We're looking for the lighting angles and little tips like that last area there of darkening it up all the way down. Sometimes it's best for me to keep that in the video just so you guys understand the lighting, or at least it's explained to make life a little bit easier. We're going to continue here all the way along. My hand's already getting cramped. We've got all of our little sort of suction points in play. We can then go ahead and set the brush size to around about 16. These ones over here, these ones get slightly darker because they're not facing our light source quite as much. So these ones over here, the bottom side of them, we'll darken them up. This one here, as it starts to round up and face up there, you could probably only do this left edge, really darkening that up a few times. And then around the sort of base more than anything. Now these ones here, we just want to add the lighting to the top as always. So we'll do the left hand side and the very sort of edge. And then this one here is pretty much bang on facing all the way up. So the only thing I can do here is sort of add in a little bit of a shadow towards this bottom edge. Likewise this one too. This one here has just a little bit of space down there, a little bit on here too. Now these ones are pretty much going to need to kind of have just the lightest amount of texture on them, and that's it. They're all somewhat facing. Now again, we can make our brush size a bit bigger, say 24, and kind of darken up these ones over here on the left hand side to just tone them down a little bit more and leave the right side nice and bright, again facing our light source. Now these ones down here, I think I will actually skip ahead. So we're just going to do exactly the same thing as we did before. So we're just going to set our brush size down to around about sort of the 8 point, and you're just going to want to go ahead and put your little donuts in there, and we will carry on from that. Now if I go ahead and zoom in for you just so you can see how those three all turned out, you can see how the shadows affect each one. I'll zoom in and you can pause if needs be. And so that's how that one turned out. And then that's how this one turned out as well. So now we've done those, if we go down a layer, the next one is actually the purple that they rest on. So if we tap on the eye here, you can see that flashing. If I tap on that, we're going to also tap on it and alpha lock it. So we can't paint outside of that as well. And in a similar sort of principle, we're going to go ahead and highlight things, etc. in those areas and darken things up and lighten things, etc. So what we're going to go ahead and do is, I think we'll start first of all with some shadow tones. So again, I think we'll grab this color here, the middle of that fourth column. Your brush wants to be a little bit bigger again, so I think we're going to go up to around about maybe the 60 point. Now this left side, of course, is shadowed. So what I can do is I can go ahead and really sort of darken it up down here. Be brave with it. And we can go ahead and darken up this side over here. I can bring the brush size actually down to maybe around about 45 and just do this edge here. Is just trying to show that it's maybe a bit of a rounded object. It's not perfectly flat. So a little something like this. Then what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and grab some lighter tones. So the middle of the first column, we'll go ahead and run this pink in the middle here, brightening this up, giving it some nice color. Really bringing that out, bringing in that sort of lighted area, or lit area should I say. And then grab the color in the top left, brighten that up a tiny bit more in there as well, right in the middle, and then you should have this lovely textured flipped over sort of aesthetic. Now one thing that's really important though is if we go ahead and grab this color here, the middle again of the fourth column, and we set our brush size to something a little bit smaller, something maybe around about sort of the let's go for the 15 mark. We want to add shadows to all of these. So we just want to go round here very quickly, adding in shadows here. So what that does is that just connects the two together. It shows that you're understanding that that is connected to that surface. So adding in a bit of a shadow there now gives me that impression immediately. And you can be quite sort of bold and brave with them, you know, really darken them up in behind here. Drag those shadows down a little bit. So you can see I'm doing it mainly on the left edge and pushing it down. Look at where that shadow sits. Do the same here. Now these ones here, we may want to go ahead and just really sort of go for something a bit different. We could probably go for a soft airbrush, for example, or undersprayers. Bring the brush size right down and then just probably just chuck the shadow in there like so. Yeah, that's a little bit easier, isn't it? So just chuck the shadow in behind there, push that off to the left. We'll remember that then for the rest of it. And then just making sure it's a little bit darker behind there. And you should end up with this amazing amount of contrast to it. And then we repeat. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and continue with the middle of the fourth column. Go back to your brush and go back to the sand blaster in sprayers. We're going to look for where our shadows are now. Our shadows are going to be mainly on this left side now. So bringing the brush back up to around about the 50 mark. We're going to go over here on this left side, darken this up because there's no lighting, but then it blends very quickly into what will be a shadow highlight. So we'll go down here, bring in a tiny bit here, but ultimately most of this side is actually going to be in the highlights. So we'll jump straight to it, the middle of the first column. Brighten up here. Lighting again is really important to always remember where is it coming from, and therefore how can I try and sort of portray that, and how can I show where it's directing onto the surfaces. I'll grab then the color in the top left of the palette and brighten this area up again. This is right on the edge, so we can show how bright this is now, showing how the lighting is just coming right across and hitting that tentacle. Now if we go ahead then and we go to our brush again, let's just change it to the soft airbrush. We'll grab the middle of the second column and we'll make sure our brush size is still a little bit smaller. We're just going to sort of where we've introduced our shadows just before. These ones here are really sort of important to get it in the right spot. So just a tiny bit around there. These ones here are going to be a bit tricky. This one arguably needs a shadow sort of a little bit downwards. A little bit down here, a little bit down here too, and a little bit down there. This one over here around the base and off to the left. And this one here will drag out a few sort of lines there just to kind of increase the size of that shadow a little bit more. And there we go, we've got a beautiful textured octopus tentacle. And we've got to repeat that in these areas down below. So it's actually then the layer, it's the same layer we're working on, but it's just down in here. Now, these ones aren't going to be quite as tricky to do. So in fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep the soft airbrush to start with at around about sort of a 50 point. I'm going to darken up in here, right in the middle, and on the left side primarily. And then again, underside of here, in there. And then I'm going to go ahead and grab just the bright tone here, the middle of the first column. We'll go back to our brush, go back to the sandblaster, and we will just brighten up on the top edge. A little bit in there, maybe give like the odd dash of texture in there just to sort of keep it with the rest of the aesthetic. Again, going up here, and then a little bit on the inside there. And again, a little bit in here too. I'm not too fussed about making it look like the rest because these ones are not quite in the lighting as much. Now, the only other thing we've got going on, of course, is the tentacles at the back. Now, you could leave them exactly as they are. And to be honest, I think majority of people will. But what we could do is we could tap on this layer and we could alpha lock it so we can't paint outside of it. If we just grab this blue, the middle of the second column, we can zoom in and we can just maybe add in like a little bit of blue on this top edge, trying to make sure that they are still nice and dark. So even on camera, I can see that that's not quite coming across that bright, but on my screen, I can see it a lot more. This one here, I'll probably add a little bit of blue, but inside the body, we'll just leave it dark as a silhouette and then a little bit of color on the top edge of this one here too. Just to try and add in a bit of texture on them, but ultimately still keep it in those darker areas. And you could actually say that we're done there. You could actually then go ahead though and add in some further lighting. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. So I'm going to create a new layer and drag it underneath, just in front of our gradient. Now you can pick a color that you sort of fancy really. Let's start off with the middle of the first column there. I'm going to set my brush size to something much larger. So something around about maybe 200 point. If we zoom out, I kind of want to get a gauge for how big that's going to be. So let's make it 250. And let's go round in a circular motion and kind of build in a bit of a glow up in this top right area and kind of create curves and let that kind of get really messy. Once you've created like a bit of a sort of color spread like that, if we grab the color in the top left of the palette and we build on top of that, but mainly up in this top right area, again creating curves to kind of slowly blend the colors together, a little something like this. If we then go ahead and we tap on the layer, if we tap up here to switch its blend mode, so we tap again, tap here. We can go ahead and change it to example for either overlay, or you could change it to linear dodge if you want to get something nice and bright. And then bring the linear dodge right down. Let's maybe bring that down to say around about 25 there, just so that we've got on the opacity scale a little bit of texture coming in from that top right area. Now, in my opinion, my octopus is also not quite in the right position. And just in case yours isn't either, go up to your create tools here, go ahead and go to edit, and go to transform and basic, and then in the bottom right of all of your layers there's a little dot. If you tap on that and hit the checkbox, you'll be able to select multiple layers at the same time. So I want to select everything for my octopus, excluding the background, and now I can just move my octopus down a little bit, put it into the center of the design a little bit more so it's perfectly centered. Hit the tick when I'm done. And then again, another thing you could do is create another new layer in the background. Let's go ahead and grab that second color in the first column again, making sure we're still with the sand blaster. You can go ahead then, and once you tap away, you can go ahead and run some light beams through here from that top right point. So just sort of blending them out across your canvas a little something like this. You may in a minute need to sort of blend out the corners. So what we'll do is we'll tap on the layer for a minute and we'll tap on it and change its blend mode as well to linear dodge. You'll get these nice bright lines that come across the screen. Bring them down as well. I'm going to only bring it down though to around about 76% though. And then I'm going to go ahead and grab my eraser, tap on the eraser and use the option of sprayers and the soft airbrush again. Make that size nice and large, probably around about say 500 mark. I think that would do the trick, if not slightly larger than that. Let's go 700. We can just blend them out towards the bottom. So blend them out in the corners and as they sort of drift away to the edge of your frame. That way you can get some nice light beams coming across and kind of showing maybe the bubbles in the actual background area. So have some fun creating some background elements should you wish to. I'm probably going to go ahead and tap on this one and bring the opacity down of the first one down to something a bit lower again, maybe down to about 14. And then I'm going to tap on my light beams again and probably bring them down a tiny bit as well to probably around about 55. That then doesn't mean that they overwhelm our subject. And if we go ahead and we pinch with 2 fingers and we go full screen with 4, we end up with today's finished design. So I hope you enjoyed this octopus design using Infinite Painter. As always, make sure to tag me in your finished creations over on Instagram, Facebook, or TikTok, wherever you decide to share them. And as always, if you want to support the channel here and the work that I do, you can now become a member of the channel, where you get a loyalty badge beside your name that grows over time the longer you are a supporter. You can also get early access to my tutorials, and potentially we'll have some exclusive tutorials in the future to come. But for now, loyalty badge and also early access. So be sure to check that out using the link in the description down below. And if you like this video here on YouTube, you'll love this one on the screen now. Thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you in the next one.